This is how Robert Ott sees his daughter.
All right, sounds good. Sit down and tell me a story.
Flowering Warrior Enterprises presents the documentary, Certain Victory. The story of a man who went from victim to survivor, who made a positive difference in many lives. At the age of 21, Robert J. Ott, a second-degree black belt, was the owner of the Traditional Martial Arts Institute in Somerdale, New Jersey. On October 6, 1990, Robert's life changed forever. This is his story.
It's October 6th, and 15 years ago, I didn't know if I'd be alive. And 15 years ago, I certainly didn't know I'd be where I'm at today. But I think I took a lot of anger and everything, turned it around and said, well, the hell with you, let me show you how it's done.
I was managing the Admiral Lounge. It was a strip club on the Wilson Boulevard, Camden. It was like my 25th year.
Before we went out to that bar that night, we had no plans on going. I just came over his house for a few drinks, and we were just hanging out, having a good time. And he had mentioned that there was a girl at that bar that he was interested in and wanted to go see her and wanted to go out to the bar. So I asked him if I could come along, and at first he said no, but then said, okay, we'll go, because I was the only one with him, so we went together.
Him and his girlfriend broke up. And I think if that didn't happen, this might all never happened. I'm not sure. But after they broke up, he started hanging out, coming around all the time.
Hung around in the pike, couple shortcuts, boom, on the highway, bang, 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 boom, walked into the bar, my dad's bar. He sees me coming in, and he just, he takes his hand and goes, oh no. As if, what is the night in store for now when me and my son get together?
Place was packed, mobbed. I got doormen all over the place. He was buddies with all the doormen. They're all the same age. They're all tough guys, And he got along with everybody. And all the girls loved him. They all did. Not one, two, all of them. And they're all like 10s walking around, I loved it. I mean, here's my handsome son, it was good. It was all cool. It was clean. There was no danger. There was, in my eyes, there was nothing. Can't hurt nobody, you know what I mean?
I was sitting at the bar. I was chit-chatting with a girl named Susie. And all of a sudden, my dad came walking by me. He said, come on, come with me. We got to card some people coming in. In other words, what he's saying is, I want you by my side, as well as Paul the bouncer. We got a group of people showed up. Well, I don't work for him or anything like that, but I'm friends with everybody. It's my father. Sure. I take my leather jacket off. I have the girl watch it for me. And I head out there with him, Paul. There was about a dozen guys. Turns out it was a bachelor party. They were in a van. And you could tell they were already wasted. They already were drinking. And carded everybody paid cover charge. They got in. And then there was the last two guys.
Doorman comes to me, Bob, I got these 20 guys at the door, or whatever. A couple of them don't have ID, bachelor party. I said, let me check it out.
And my dad kind of played around with them for a while, toyed around with them, finally got the cover charge and let them in. I don't know, it's just a weird feeling. I was out there having to do that, and I didn't enjoy that too much, but I didn't say anything about it. I sat down and started chit-chatting with the female.
The routine is I go with the bachelor and the bachelor's dad. I buy them a drink. And that's what I was doing. Took him in, buying the bachelor and his father a drink. And everything's going on the way it is. Well, there's the one asshole that Bobby and him this guy starts torturing this young dancer that Bobby was talking to. And Bobby and her were friends. They became buddies. The guy got real rude with her, and Bobby sort of defended her a little bit.
When he came there, the girl that he went there to go see, she got off, she had a break, and she came out onto the floor and sat down on a stool next to Bob, and they were talking. But she was, dressed a little skimpy, and she was a little upset because she said, a lot of the guys that came in were staring at her, I guess making her feel uncomfortable. So he turned to Bob and said, "Bob, I'm feeling cold, can I wear your jacket?" So Bob put his jacket around her, and I think that's initially what started the fight. The man that he got in a fight with turned to Bob and was like, "Well, what are you doing that for? I came here to look at the girls," basically.
One of those two gentlemen that I was describing that came in last with no identification approached her and started saying stuff to her. And she would get closer to me, letting him know that she's with me. And I was cool about it in the beginning. I was no big deal, it's cool. But it got to the point where he wouldn't, stop. And she eventually left to go back to the back room. I, at the time, put on my leather jacket. I said to the guy, I said, "My friend, you've had a little bit too much to drink." I turned and I walked the opposite way back towards my buddy was. And I got pushed from behind. And I turned around to defend myself. And as I turned around, it's like everything happened this quick. I turned around, and all of a sudden my dad was behind me, pushing me out the door. And the bouncer, Paul, was pushing the other guy out the door. And my dad was saying to me, "You're going to kick this guy's ass, you're going to do this, you're going to do that." And he's saying it out loud, so the other guy's hearing it too and everything. And I'm sitting there with my hands like, "Well, what do you, what, how come, My dad wanted to show his son off.
So I just happened to turn around and seen that he was up, standing up with another gentleman. They were pushing each other, and I knew something was going on. So when I walked over, the bouncers were standing there. It just happened to be in front of the door to get into the place, and there was a small foyer. And one of the bouncers came to me and said, "Look, we have to take this outside."
Every step that I was making was another second that went by, and we're already out the door in the foyer. And at that time, by the time we got to the foyer, I had to forget the decision making, and I had to defend myself. That's where the fight started. Fists were flying to the face, stomach. I kneed the individual very hard. I then put my leg between his two legs and did a major inner leg sweep, which dropped him to the ground. I then dropped directly down on top of him, driving my knee into his nuts.
Things happened fast. It was kind of noisy. It was kind of crowded. And next thing I knew, I heard a pop. And I remember not even realizing it was a gun. I thought at first it was a firecracker or something. And being in such a small room, I couldn't even tell in which direction the noise came from. I remember looking into the bar like, what happened? I thought someone had thrown a firecracker in there because, you know, you hear guns on TV and they're very loud and just like deeper in sound. This sounded like a higher pitched snap, and I was like, you know, it sounded just like a little firecracker.
It was really fast the way everything happened. The other guy in the bachelor party went around outside, went out the back door or whatever the case would be, come in the front door and shot Bobby in the head while he was fighting the other guy. It was like that.
I didn't see Bob right away, but I remember looking up and seeing the gunman standing at the door, and he was shouting something out, but I don't even recall what he was saying, but I was just focused on the gun. And the gun was pretty much like, I would say, 1.5 to 2 feet away from me, right in front of my face. So he scrambled out immediately. Next thing I knew, the whole room was cleared, and I looked down, and that's when I seen Bob on the ground. At that time, I remember Bob's father running in the room from the bar and saying, "Oh my God, they shot my son, they shot my son." Someone called 911. There was a puddle of blood by his head. I remember looking at him. I remember seeing him laying there. He was pretty much moaning and twitching, and I remember seeing his eye where I guess the bullet exited, and I remember seeing it just black and blue and puffed up and swollen, and it wasn't a very pretty sight, and I didn't sit there and stare.
I didn't realize exactly what was going on, and I looked down the corner and I see this guy down there, and I realized that's my son, you know? And at that time I'm like, "Bob, call an ambulance." You know, I'm like freaking out, call an ambulance, call police, you know, everything. Could I have handled it different? I guess so. I don't know anymore, you know, I mean,
this individual meant to kill me because I was talking to a female. I told him he had a little bit too much to drink, and I was standing next to the man who carted those two gentlemen who had no ID, and I was chosen to die because of that. To this day, I still can't believe it sometimes that is an answer to an issue or a problem. I just can't believe it, you know, it's amazing sometimes. But that was October 6, 1990.
The bullet's path and destruction.
The individual put the gun to my head right here. He pulled the trigger. The bullet went on an angle. It went through the left temporal lobe of my brain, damaged the nerves to my left eye, destroyed my ability to smell and taste, and exploded my right eye. My damage I ended up with is this eye, basically the nerves behind it are damaged, so therefore it's just kind of hanging there. This eye is a prosthesis. And the eyeball here, the lid itself, has a difficult time closing. So therefore, occasionally I need to put some lubrication to help with the tear because it can dry up. The bone here ends up coming out more than over here because of the damage to the skull when the bullet went through. The nose itself is straight, but certainly damaged on the sides. You can feel it. When you rub your hand here, my hand here, I can feel all the little bumps here and the scar along the side. The first surgery that was done was basically cleaning me up. And I survived it. The doctor still had no guarantees about anything. Sure enough, a month later, I ended up with meningitis. There are many different types of meningitis, and so I spent a week in the hospital before they could figure out what type of meningitis. At that point in time, the doctor then, on surgery number 2, the doctor then went to my stomach, took a piece out of my stomach, opened my skull all the way across, and patched it to the left temporal lobe where the bullet went through on the brain. So I was opened up all the way across. I can still feel some indentations here, a little bit in the center here as well, an indentation. And of course I still have this scar here, which took me a while to stretch it out. But I'll have to say, when I came to, it was a real trip to feel staples all over your belly and your forehead. But once again, when it's all said and done, I guess I'm lucky to be alive.
Robert's prosthetic eye.
One of the things I think was really interesting is, when I got my first prosthesis, I wasn't aware that an eye prosthesis only lasts so long. Apparently your skull changes shape, and every 5 years, give or take, you need to get a new prosthesis. And it's really interesting because I had thought to myself that a prosthesis, and most people do, is a little round ball. Well, surprisingly enough, they're not like that at all. They're all shaped very differently. A prosthesis is actually made by an individual who is an artist, so to speak. And they do a beautiful job, I must say. They do a wonderful job. The smoothness of it, the texture, and obviously from everybody's response, the visual, the little veins and everything. You can't even tell the difference. I have down here in this little secret bag of mine, I have in here a couple little things to show you. As we know in different things, I've been blind for 15 years, and in the 15 years, I have had a total of 3 prostheses. One, of course, is in my eye socket now. The other 2 are right here, and I'd like to show you those to you. This is one of my prostheses here, and I'm feeling it right now. You can see how in the back, it's half circle. It's got different indentations here, and there's different angles here at each angle. Each angle. And what's interesting is they're all different in the changes. And it's very smooth. And here you can see the pupil and the color. You get to pick the color you want. I was almost thinking about getting a peace sign or a martial art logo there, but I decided not to. So let me show you the next one here. Here, and as I'm feeling my hand, it's totally shaped differently with the cuts. Absolutely amazing. Here's your inside here. Quite a little dip here. The change here on the side here, I feel. Here's looking at you, kid. One of the things I didn't quite realize in having a prosthesis is that they pretty much have no wires connected. They're pretty much easy to maneuver. Obviously, when I get a new one, I need to feel out the shape and how it is and everything. But they easily come out and they easily go back in. I'm not about to do something to purposely horrify you, but I think it's important that you get a better look at things. This is my 3rd one. It easily goes back into the socket. I simply grab my eyelid and put the cork back in. Voila. That is my prosthetic eyes.
After the shooting, Robert was rushed to Cooper Hospital.
Rick and I settled down, the baby went to sleep, my mother went to sleep, and I remember that the phone rang, and Rick was ready to jump up to get it, and I just, I got a really bad feeling, and I said, no, I'll get it, you know, and I ran to the phone. The person on the other end of the phone, you know, said, is this Bobby Ott's house, or something to that effect. And I said yes, you know, and then they said, well, Bobby's been shot, you know, and I heard it, and I was like, first of all, I thought immediately, they think they've called Bob Ott Sr.'s house, and they think they're talking to Bob Ott Sr.'s mother, because, you know, for years he had been in and out of different situations, and I always thought that perhaps one day he might get shot. And so I would not allow the thought that it could be anyone else. It had to be Big Bob. And my first thought was, I'm going to have to go tell Marion, who is his mother, and Jimmy, who is his father, you know, that I was going to have to do that. By the time I got to the hospital, I had allowed myself to think that possibly it might be young Bob. I couldn't quite see how that could be, but then I thought possibly. So I was asking the doctors, there were 3 doctors, and they were neurosurgeons, and they were standing in front of me, and I was asking them to tell me, you know, is it a big Italian heavy-set man in there, or is it a young blonde-haired boy? You know, there's a difference. And I wasn't getting a straight answer. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting a straight answer. I mean, that seemed real basic to me. But they just really didn't answer me. They kept saying they didn't know, and I couldn't quite get that. And as I was about to get more clear about what to look for if it was Big Bob, I saw him come in. I saw him walk in the door of the hospital, and that was a real hard moment.
The phone was ringing, and it was his stepdad, and it was telling me that Rick's words were, Reem, there's been a terrible accident.
He said, Bobby's been shot. And I said, where was he shot? Meaning, where on his person? And Rick said, at the Admiral. I said, no, where was he shot? And he said, in the head. And that's when it just feels like you were just hit so hard in the stomach. You can't explain it. It just rolls. It just rolls up. It's an awful feeling. You're sinking. You jump up. You know you're moving, but I can't describe it other than that. It just bang.
And there was one of Bob Ott's students on the phone, hardly able to choke out words, and just said to me, Bob got shot. And I said, Bob got shot? And he said, Bob Ott got shot. I mean, I remember the numbness. I remember the sinking feeling. I can't describe the feeling. I felt like all of the blood went to my feet, and it was a moment in time that just didn't seem real. And I asked, where is he? And they told me that he had been taken to Cooper Trauma Center. So I told my wife, you know, we have to leave now.
My husband and I jumped in the car, and the whole time, my dad was already deceased. He had died, I guess, maybe a year before. I just kept praying aloud all the way. My husband was driving the car. Just, please, Dad, please, if you have anything to do with this, please keep Bobby. Help us.
I remember going to Cooper, and it's the regional trauma center. I'd never been there, thankfully. But I had an idea of where it was, having been in the city before, and we managed to find it. And I remember parking in the garage, and I remember the smell in the garage, and I remember walking to the hospital itself and finding the lobby area so I could find out where in this place Bob was, 'cause I had to see him. And they said that he was in the trauma center.
I get to the hospital, and the first people I see was Pat Hender and Bob's mother. They were very crying, very upset. They hugged me. We cried together. They were like, "Where were you, Pat and his mother, and what's going on? What happened?" And I had to, pretty much try to explain my side of the story to his mother, which wasn't easy.
I don't know that I was making things any better. I was just so angry, you know what I mean? I was just angry at so many things, like why did this happen? How could you let this happen? You're with him, what did you do? Why you didn't see this coming? We hung around so much together, you know what I mean? We always had our eyes open, you know what I mean? I was always looking out for him, he was looking out for me, and I was pissed off. Who was looking out for him that night, Who was looking out for him?
I was so angry. I wanted the person that had done it. And I was angry with him because he didn't come to dinner with me, and instead he went to the other place where the accident happened. And I was angry with myself because I wasn't there to protect him. Because if I had been, maybe it would have been different.
It was a long night. There was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of guessing my religion, guessing my beliefs. How could this have happened? It really tested me. God was testing me that night, and I was angry with them. There's no doubt about it.
They brought Bobby out to us on a gurney. We were in a small room together. His mom, stepdad, father, Bernie, myself, my husband, Dan. And it was not like you see on TV. It wasn't like ER and people rushing around and all that and, pounding on their chest. They just brought him out. The one side of his face was covered. His face was so swollen. And they just stopped for us just to look at him. And they were in no rush to rush him anywhere. Not to the operating room, nowhere.
So I was taken into the trauma center, and I remember walking past all of these people that had obviously been through horrible trauma, and that's why they were there, and coming to Bob's bed. And when I came to Bob's bed, if his mother hadn't been there, I wouldn't have known that it was Bob. He was partially covered by a sheet. He had lines and hoses going into him all over the place. I could see his big frame, his strong arms and his shoulders, and that's the martial artist that he was. But his head was so swollen. I remember that it was bigger than a basketball. And I remember when I looked at him, I couldn't believe there was blood coming out of every hole in his head, his mouth, his nostrils, his eyes, his ears. Of course, his eyes were covered, but the blood was there, and it was just coming out. And when I looked at him, I realized that he hadn't just been shot. I guess I felt like maybe he had been killed.
I was told that they weren't going to do anything, that they could not do anything, that he had been so severely hurt, his brain was injured terribly, and that the eye had shattered, and that they didn't expect him to live through the morning. He said, I have to see him, I have to see him, I have to go in and see him. And they let me go in and see him, and it was bad, it was very bad. But he was holding my hand, and he was squeezing my hand. And I was talking to him, and he was squeezing my hand in response. There was definitely, I'd say something, he would respond.
I had my hand in his, and I said, when I tell you to, squeeze and let me know you know I'm here. He would squeeze. And I thank God, I truly thank God that I had my husband there to attest to all this, because I know they would think that this was all wishful thinking on my part.
And I remember I asked the nurse, you know, is he alive and is he going to live? And she said that he is alive, and if you'd like to speak to him, you can. And maybe he'll hear you. And I was looking, I'm thinking, I don't know, but you know, but I need him to know that at least spiritually we're here together, even if he's asleep or whatever it is. And I held his hand, and I remember it was his left hand. It was on the left side of his bed. And I held his hand, and I said to him, I said, Bob, I said, you've got to be stronger now than anybody I've ever known. You know, if there's ever a time that you had to have a warrior spirit, it's right now. And I don't know to this day whether it was a reflex or whether it was him answering me. He squeezed my hand at that moment, and it was so scary. It was so scary when he squeezed my hand. I didn't know what to do, but I held it, and eventually my wife touched my shoulder, and I backed up, and you know, I realized that maybe I should walk out and give someone else a chance to come in case those were the last moments.
We would go in and we would stand over him and talk, and naturally everybody just kept talking to him. If you're alongside him, you talk.
The first thing you think about, you know, I really couldn't, you know, hug him because of the area that was affected, you know what I mean? I couldn't really put my arms around him, but I did hold his hand through the course of the night, you know, and I did talk to him, you know, and I told him I don't know, you know, we don't really talk much about it. I really haven't really, you know, fully gotten over the whole thing, you know.
He was a trauma surgeon, and he was the head of that department in Cooper. And I'm pretty sure it was he who said, I said, you know, something about, well, he hears me, he's responding. And he said, you're his mother. You want to think that. It's not possible. He's so full, he's so doped up, he can't hear or feel anything.
Finally, after going over this with Bobby so many times with the squeeze of the hand, I asked my husband to get the nurse, go to that nurse's station right there and get the nurse. I wanted her to witness this, and she did.
I started grilling seriously, you know, talking to this doctor and trying to get answers about what they were going to do. And he was being very vague, and it bothered me a lot. At one point I said, kind of out of frustration, I said, well, you're not, you know, he's not going to die. And this guy just looked at me, and his face changed a little bit, and then he said, yes, he is. The moment he said that, I cramped. I just started to go down, and Rick was there, and Rick helped pick me up. And then I was standing there, and this doctor had said that, and I didn't have any other thing to say to him or anybody else at that point. I just couldn't, you know, so I turned and I ran. And I knew what I was looking for. I was going to a chapel, because you don't tell me my son's going to die without, you know, I have to pray. I have to do that. And I remember saying, I'm passing Rick, and he's like, well, honey, what are you doing? And I'm just flying there. You know, when I said, get a priest, you know, get a priest.
I think that somebody came in and gave him his last rites or something. You know, that was what I was told, you know, and they wanted to. And his mother said, no, he's going to live. He's going to live. After a long period of time, and everybody telling me that I had to go home, that I was up too late, and that it was like 7 in the morning, and new shift was coming on. I gave in. I went home. I thought about Nan. I thought, she's been all those hours by herself, and I have to go home. And I just, you know, as I was leaving, they told me that, and I don't know which one told me, but somebody said that I should be expecting a phone call, and when the call came, they would need my permission to pull the plug. So we went home. I got there not long, and the goddamn phone rang. And I remembered, you know, everybody kind of stopped. I mean, my mother was talking, and Rick was there and all, but, you know, and I said, no, nobody answered that phone, you know. And it rang a while. And then I picked it up, and on the other end of
the phone was Fran Orth, who was a nurse at intensive care. And she was saying to me, something good has happened. I made a call. I'm Bob's intensive care nurse, and I've been watching him through the night. And I had reason to believe that I should contact another doctor. And we were able to reach Dr. Louis Cervantes. He operated on Reagan's aide Brady, who had been shot also and had severe trauma to the head. And he had saved his life. And she got across that this was an eminent doctor who, was considered to be very good. And she said, he wants to talk to you. He needs your permission to operate.
There was a nurse there that saw that he was responding. She just, I don't know if it was conspicuous or if you could just credit that to her good work and conscientious approach to things. But somebody there saw that he was trying and called a neurosurgeon that wasn't there and said, "You got to help this guy."
Totally blind, Robert does most of the same activities he did before becoming blind. Robert uses systems and tools for remaining independent.
Next to the bed here I have one of my most favorite special things, my lovely calculator clock. Notice how I hit this. First I better put the volume on. I hit this.
It's 2:10 p.m.
And it lets me know what time it is. I hit this.
It's Wednesday, September 20 today.
It's actually Tuesday, September 20th, today. Little issues. Over here we can clear it.
Clear.
And then of course we can come down here, we can do some basic math and everything like this. We've got 58, of course, times 31. We know that it equals
1,798.
Often I do that in the middle of the night while I'm sleeping. That's why I keep it near the bed. You know, it's changing different ways here, but basically my closet here, you'll notice I keep things very organized. It's very important because I'm a very independent person. I don't want to have to ask people all the time, my wife, for example, what do I have on? I want to know what I have on. And so there's different ways of doing it. And I do different ways, okay? One of my first ways that I worked on was, you know, once a week or every other week I would get together with somebody who can see, and I put my clothes together. What I do is I take these sets here. Notice this little ring that I've got around it. This keeps these hangers together so it doesn't get mixed up with other things. So I've got these shorts and this nice shirt together, being that they will match together. I will tell you, I usually work with black shoes and black belt, only because I like the black belt, but also because black is black and brown is 5 million different types of brown. So that's how I keep these together. One of the more advanced things I've been doing lately, with the excellent technology we have, is every once in a while, want to whip out one of my lovely tools. Needless to say, this is one of my favorite tools here. This is a special gadget I will show you real quick here. I take the top off. Most people would think I use this for underarm deodorant. Actually, I turn this way, and I put this on me.
Green, gray, blue, light green.
It simply tells me the colors.
Green, green, green.
It is sharing with me that it is green.
Blue.
Now it is blue.
Green.
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 So obviously it is a bluish, greenish, grayish type of shirt,
Green.
which for most people would mean absolutely nothing. But when you put it next to your shorts,
Light blue.
and then the machine says black, we know that those black shorts and that shirt will go together very nicely with nice black sandals. So I've easily just gotten dressed and looked presentable. And that is how I'm able to tell what colors I have on. It gets a little complicated sometimes. But then again, my life's never been basic and easy.
8 hours after the shooting, Robert goes into surgery.
I drove back up there and met with Dr. Cervantes and signed papers and everything, and Dr. Cervantes said that I had to understand that just because they operated, there was no guarantee that he would be able to walk, talk, move. We didn't know at that point if he was going to be a vegetable. The doctor really outlined very clearly what could be, which I know is his responsibility. He needs to do that. So they really prepare you for the worst. But he did feel he could save his life.
I remember at a point it occurred to me that he's going to live. And I wonder what that means, you know, from a guy that was such a physical presence and so skilled and talented. What would his abilities be, and what would he still be able to get out of it all? And one thing's for sure is that he was always a fighter, and that had to count for something. You know, Bob was never the kind of guy to take one on the chin and go down. He was the kind of guy to take one on the chin and spit a tooth out at you and come back. And I think that somehow, consciously or unconsciously, that he took that fight to this new fight, the biggest fight of his life.
So during that operation, an hour or two after they started, a doctor came out, another doctor, and he said, I just wanted to let you know that Bob's, you know, he's very strong and he's doing very well, and, you know, given the circumstances, he looks like he's going to be all right, you know. And I had to ask you something. I wanted to know, something unusual happened, and I wonder if you could just tell me, what does your son do for a living? And I thought, well, geez, this is a good question at this point, you know. But I said something about he's in martial arts, and this was an anesthesiologist, and he explained that in 11 years of being an anesthesiologist, he had never seen what occurred with Bob happen. And he told me how usually when you induct, and he used that word induct, when you induct someone with anesthesia, blood pressure will go down, and that's just what happens. He actually thought there was something wrong with the machines that were reading the levels, because Bob's blood pressure didn't waver. And he said, I really believe your son has tremendous control, and he is controlling his physical being right now. And he said, I've heard of it, I haven't seen it actually happen, but I think that's what's happening now, and I think that I had to talk to you because, he said, I know it's a little unusual for an anesthesiologist to be talking in this way. He said, but I had to find out what he did. He said he's in excellent physical condition, and he said he on top of that, he's mentally so strong. He said, I think he has every chance of doing well, you know. And that was a real turning point, because I was hearing something positive.
As he came out of it, it was just so fast. They just couldn't believe, the community, the medical people could not believe that this fellow's talking and up and moving.
When he was talking early on, it was difficult sometimes because he would lose his train of thought. There was still a lot of brain swelling and a lot going on there. And I remember talking to Bob, and sometimes I wouldn't quite know what he had said or what he was saying, but it was sure great to hear that voice. You know, that Rocky Balboa voice of his that you can't miss, and it was him.
My hair was amazing. I remember laying in the hospital when I started touching myself to feel what happened to me. And I remember feeling my hair was here, sticking up, greasy, and over here it was shaved with scars all over. And I couldn't get over the fact we went through all this and they couldn't shave off all my hair. I understand you're pushed for time, but couldn't you come back afterwards and finish it off? Instead of just letting me sit there looking like the damn Elephant Man? I'm so upset by that. So that was my hair, laying in the hospital.
Early on, I would go up and spend almost like a night shift, and I would stay to give his mother a break, and I would just sit next to him all night. And this is only, I would say, still within days of this, maybe the end of a week. And he said, I gotta walk, I have to get up. And I said, okay. And I took the IV bottle, and I took the whole stand, and I put his hand on my shoulder. There was not much to encumber him. There weren't even that many as far as bandages or anything. And I put his arm on my shoulder, and I went out, and I went down the hall. And I went by the nurses' stations, and I can see their faces. They're looking at me. I'm trying to be quiet. It's 3 o'clock. And again, you know how loud he is, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're going down the middle of whatever floor at the Cooper. And they just looked at me, and you know, and I just looked at them, and down we went, turned around, and came back.
He looked different. He had surgeries to his head. There were scars, unbelievable scars. And you know, for a long time he didn't have his hair, and when he came back in, there were places on his head where he didn't have hair because of the scarring and because of continuing procedures. Bob did lose a lot of weight. A lot of his muscle tone went away. You know, Bob was a real strong kid. It was he'd jump down and bang out 100 push-ups like it was nothing, lift weights and punch the heavy bag, and you know, things started to atrophy, and he started to look thinner and weaker. And I remember he was very white. He you know, he wasn't outside getting the sun and being active the way he always had. So he did look very, very different. And I remember thinking about the fact that he looked different, but realizing that Bob can't see, so it doesn't matter what anything looks like. It doesn't matter what anybody looks like. It's really him. It's the person, not the look.
I used to make him pasta fagioli. I used to feed him Italian food because that hospital food was crap. He was like 180 pounds, 195-pound man, and to shrink down to 125, 130 pounds, he lost a lot of weight. He looked real shriveled up, and it was hard for him to get around. I'd have to take him into the bathroom. I'd have to, I did all the things that you do for someone that you love and you care about. You know what I mean? It's your family. But I would feed him that pasta. He liked the pasta, and I'll tell you what, he put the weight on him, get him back up to shape.
I had a nurse at one point during those 3 weeks who told me that I was not turning on the TV enough. I would turn it off because Bob's head hurt so bad. He didn't want the radio or television on. He just wanted quiet. And they said that I was hurting his recovery because he should be stimulated. And one nurse even called my mother and said that I was allowing him to have too much quiet. And I thought about it a lot. I certainly didn't want to do anything to hurt him, and I was his mother, And I just believed that if there was ever a time in his life when he needed someone to give him the time to heal in his own way, it was going to be now. He left against medical advice when we thought he was basically okay to come home, and he said he really wanted to come home, and if we didn't take him home, he was going to jump out the window or something, and we thought that's just not okay. We better take him home. So we took him home.
When I first came in from the hospital the very first time, I took the ambulance home from the hospital, and I remember here I am in an ambulance. I'd never been in an ambulance before. Obviously I did when I got shot, but I don't remember that time. I was out of it. But here I am in an ambulance heading home. Until you've been in an ambulance and land in one of those beds with these weird people all around you and sirens going, and you're heading to your hometown in an ambulance. Until you've been through that, you just don't realize what it's like. I was embarrassed to come home in an ambulance. Yet, that was the way to do it, I suppose. And we get to the house, and the ambulance driver says, "Do you have the money on you now to pay the bill for the ambulance?" My mother didn't have the money on her. She said, "Well, let me write you a check." She said, "No, we need cash." I'm laying here. It's the first time I got out of the hospital, and I'm laying here. And the ambulance drivers are demanding cash from my mother. I was extremely weak, scared. I'm home, in front of my house, and embarrassed. And the ambulance drivers are demanding money from my mother. I was not able to do anything. I ended up going into the house. My mother had to go with the ambulance to the bank around the corner to get money.
I don't know who actually brought it to his attention about his hair, but I brought over clippers. I had a set of clippers. And it was just like unbearable, because the noise next to his head, everything, touch his head I was scared to death. Because they had taken his head off his skull so many times, and they were in here and everything was so recently worked on. But we did it. I think he wanted to kill me.
He was real sensitive around the area of the face and of the head, you know what I mean? He didn't, nothing could really touch him, and even to wash his face and to clean his face, that took some time. It took some, it was painful for him. It was very, very sensitive, and his eyes were, they were, they didn't have any glasses on, so they were open, and one eye, of course, which he was missing, that was open as well.
We had talked to Dr. Cervantes, and the thing to look out for was to be very careful about spinal meningitis. He had started to while he was in the hospital, his nose started leaking, and they thought that it had to do with a cavity in the brain, and so he was having this leaking nose, and his head was all bandaged and things were tough. It was a few days, and At one point, we took him back to the hospital and we met Dr. Cervantes. Dr. Cervantes met us there. I think that may have been like a Tuesday. And Dr. Cervantes gave him a spinal tap and told him he had spinal meningitis and he had to come back to the hospital. Now, we had just gotten Bob declared, able to make his own decisions. So this actually kind of turned around on us because I couldn't admit Bob to the hospital. And Dr. Cervantes said, you're breaking your mother's heart, she's going to cry. And at that point, Bob said, her tears will dry. I'm not coming back to the hospital.
Not feeling well, not being able to see, he was beginning his thought process through this. And there was a very heavy time for him, and I think perhaps, let's just say, his thought wasn't clear enough at that point to realize maybe you should be back in the hospital.
A friend of mine had given me a Merck manual. I started reading about spinal meningitis, and one of the major signs about it was he would go into a stage of vomiting, and it would be like uncontrollable vomiting. And I'm reading these books, and I'm thinking about the vomiting, and he hadn't. And I remember saying to Maureen, well, he hasn't gone into any vomiting, and he might just get past this. This just might be a fever. We might be able to break this fever, and he might just get past this.
Believe it or not, I actually picked him up and lifted him out of a bathtub because he had collapsed in there, and I was trying to give him a shower at home. He said, I want to take a shower. I said, okay, and I got him to the shower, which he went on his own power, and just, he literally went down.
Early Thursday morning, about 5 in the morning, he starts to vomit. And it was a very severe vomiting. And he's rambling, and I'm telling him, all right, call the hospital, we're going back, and we're not sure if they're going to take us back. And Bob's, I'm not going, in between vomiting, and I remember just saying, all right, damn it, enough. You're not going to die, and you're not dare going to die now, and you're going to go to that hospital, and you're going to let them treat you. That's the way it is. And he all right, Mom, all right. So the ambulance came and we got him to the hospital. In that first day or so, they wanted to strap him down, and they told me that they didn't have time, they didn't have the nurses to take him back and forth to the bathroom. And that was when I decided that things were tough enough. They were not strapping him down. There was no reason for that. If he wanted to go to the bathroom, he was able to get up and walk to the bathroom before, then he could do this. And I just was going to be there to make sure it happened, that nobody gave him a catheter. They wanted to strap him down and give him a catheter just because they didn't have the care to take him to the bathroom. And I'm sorry, it wasn't okay. And that was when I decided I was going to stay and I was not leaving. And I believe at some point they told me that I had to leave, and at some point I told them I absolutely was not leaving, and if they wanted me to leave, they could, So for a few days they didn't do anything. There was, just the one bed, and the other bed they took out of there, and I had Rick brought things up. I had, I don't know, pillows and things, and I put them on the floor, and that's how I slept.
One day I was just standing up, and my mother was in front of me, and I thought she was a ghost in front of me. So I swatted my hand to go through the ghost, to stop the ghost. And of course, at that point in time, it was my mother, and I clocked my mother. And thankfully, I was very weak at the time. I didn't have quite the same strength. Otherwise, my luck, she would have flown out the window, and that would have been all for my mother. So we're glad that didn't happen. But these were the kind of things that were going through my mind so much, these illusions.
He would get upset because he would put his feet down from the bed. If he put his bare feet down, he would feel that, and even if I give him slippers, he'd put his foot on the floor and he'd know that it was cold floor. And I couldn't figure out at first what was going on. And after a while he said something like, you know, why won't you let me in? And I couldn't, you know, well, we're in a hospital, no, you won't let me in. Well, how come I have to be out in the garage? Why won't you let me in? I was good, I'm a good boy, you know, and I couldn't, my heart was broken. I really didn't. But as soon as he started saying the garage thing, I thought, you know, he thinks I won't let him in the house for some reason, and this is terrible. I have to do something to help him with this. And I called Rick, and I told Rick to bring up a rug. And, you know, it was against hospital rules, but they did let me, when I explained, they let me have a rug there. And it was big enough, I don't know, you know, 6 by 9 or something. And I put it by Bob's bed, and then he felt like he was inside, and he was okay. In terms of his mental state and the way things were for him at that point, he had a very bad time. He would get upset, he would cry, and I couldn't figure out what he was upset about. One of the things we were noticing was his words were turned around, like he would ask for a blanket, and we saw this at home too. He would ask for a blanket, and he would cry when you gave him a blanket. He would get upset because he really wanted a pillow, or he wanted something else, and he didn't have the word for it. So clearly this was a problem. It was during that second time in his hospitalization that they had a decision had to be made. Should he have a shunt, which would alleviate some of the problem as far as the spinal meningitis went? It would alleviate the danger for that, apparently. But the decision was, you know, here was a young, active boy. If he had a shunt, he would have to wear a helmet at times. He could not be rough. He could not be physically active in the way that he had been before. Dr. Cervantes approached us with a different option, and this was an operation that had not been done very much. It was in its infancy stages, but basically the idea was that they would take lining from his stomach area, and they would reline. They would pick up the brain off the stem. This is how it was explained to me. They would actually pick the brain up off the stem and reline his head, you know, reline the brain cavity, whatever, with this membrane from his stomach. And then they would place the brain back on again in the right way. And what had happened was his brain had shifted with the gunshot wound, and that's why his words were being mixed up. He really didn't have the placement of the brain in the right way. So Dr. Cervantes said that he felt that he could do this operation. Well, he was one of the few people in the world who would even attempt this operation. I later learned, you know, neurosurgeons came just to watch this operation, and it was written in books about it. It was a medical breakthrough. Dr. Cervantes did this particular operation, and some days later, it was determined that the operation was a success.
Robert continues to give martial arts seminars since losing his sight.
I've come to a point in my life where I have realized how much martial arts is a way of life for me in everything I do every day, from my business to being a father, a friend, and a husband. From myself speaking to people and sharing my story, I realize how much martial arts has to do with that. Today, I continue holding seminars and motivational speaking all over the country. My most recent one was at the Dragon Gym in Exton, Pennsylvania under Grandmaster J Ott. It was my 134th seminar that I've done since I've been blind.
Well, I'm glad I'm not scared about being in front of people. You want to know if I'm okay? Of course I'm okay. This is my original school I come from. Close your eyes. Keep your eyes closed. Now, in your mind, your eyes closed, do you remember what I look like? Yes, sir. Keep your eyes closed. Do you remember Kwang Jin? Yes, sir. Do you see him in your mind? Yes, sir. Keep your eyes closed. You remember your family?
Yes, sir.
You remember your house?
Yes, sir.
You remember your teacher in school?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what an apple looks like?
Yes, sir.
That's how I see it. You can open your eyes now. Order.
Order.
Justice.
Justice.
G.
G.
Wisdom.
Wisdom.
Everybody say Pilsung.
Pilsung.
Pilsung means strength, courage, indomitable spirit. Pilsung means certain victory. And Kwanzaa and Grandmaster Go taught me certain victory. That is something that goes past what color your belt is. That is something that goes past how high your kick is. That is something that goes past how many forms you know. It is a whole nother level that I was given an honorary gift from Kwanzaa. All right, what is your question? Am I still blind? See, it's interesting. You're very similar to my wife. Martial arts has helped me in many ways overcome what has happened to me and turn it around into a positive thing that has helped many others.
Robert finds out if his loss of sight is permanent.
When he got out of the hospital the second time, Bob had not been told that he was blind, and they wanted me to talk to him right there at the doctor's office. And I said no, that I wasn't going to discuss it with him there. And I was waiting. I was waiting. Bob, you know, he has a very good mind. And when he was ready to handle that, he was going to ask me. And he did. He one day said, "Mom, I need you to tell me what's the matter with my eyes." And that was a difficult, very difficult conversation. But, you know, I had hopes at that point that we were going to go to Will's Eye and we were going to see Dr. Semino, and so we didn't know yet. You know, I could leave it like that. I could say, right now you can't see, you know, and however I explained it, I'm sure I gave him some details, but the idea was we're going to go to Will's Eye and we're going to see this famous doctor.
He knew he had reasons why he couldn't see, but he didn't know he was blind. And that came, and it came along and came out. I I can remember holding a light in front of him without him knowing it because he told me he thought he saw something. And I did, and I got a light. And my mother was next to him. And I had just had to see for myself. He didn't see anything.
I remember I went and got him a cane, his first walking, that stick. He didn't want nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it, you know. I got him glasses. He didn't want nothing to do with it. Because I guess he did, I'm not going to be blind. I'm going to be able to see. You know what I mean? I don't need this.
So we go to Will's Eye, and it's just a big high-rise building. It's a hospital downtown. And big, long, you know, trip up the elevator. It was, to me, it was quiet. It was a quiet day. It was, Bob was optimistic. And when you're with him, no matter what you're thinking, you know, you have to hope that they're going to tell us something. And Bob goes in there and he sits there and gets the examination. He's sitting there like he's going to get a haircut. And the guy dropped the bomb on him. Dropped the bomb on him, you know. I mean, he wasn't bad. He was fine. Everything he said was fine. But Bob just had the worst news that he could possibly get. That can't do anything. And I could hear him, and he's saying, "Are you sure? You know, I just really figured, you know, that, you know, by the time we get down to business here, that, you know, there'd be some kind of a procedure. Are you sure there isn't anything?" You know, and he's asking, and he doesn't. He's just he's like the eager beaver at the counter. You know, he's trying to get his word in and get the better goods and try to figure out something. You know, like there's got to be a way to talk your way into getting some kind of an arrangement like this. If I work with this guy, he's going to tell me something can be done. You know. I mean, he doesn't give up, and he didn't freak out, and he didn't lose it. He's just like still trying to reason, trying to get something, you know. And I mean, really, that's the way I saw it. And but he didn't get any good news.
One day he called me up and told me he was blind, and I said, "I know, Bob." And he was crying on the phone, and it really made me upset also. You know, after all these years of knowing Bob and how big and how strong he is, and you know, you look up to the man, you know what I mean? And this is the guy you look up to. Now he's on the phone crying. And it's very hard, very hard.
When Bob did tell me for the first time that he was permanently blind, I think I already knew. And we all like to have hope. And I didn't discuss that with him because that wasn't my place to hurt his hope. But I did feel such a loss. I felt so much that he had been cheated out of the things that he wanted to do. And I felt that I had been cheated too because, you know, this was my best martial art friend. And the martial arts are my way of life. So when I say martial art friend, it's not just a thing, it's not a racquetball partner. You know, it's not something like that. It's, you know, we were on the same journey and we had spent our lives doing it. And now I didn't know whether he would be able to be an active participant or not.
We always seem to make it clear to him that maybe he was left here for a purpose. Just that simple. Because we didn't think he was going to make it, and he did make it. So, you know, and we said, "Bob, we think, you know, you're here for a reason. Whatever that is, will, you know, in time, will unfold. And it may be over time. It may take a long time for this to happen, but, you know, we just told him that." So I think he realized he had something to give, I think, early in this, and I think that helped him. And his community of martial arts people were quick to reach out to him as well.
I remember when a knock on my door, and it was my very first martial arts instructor, Richard M. Kenbin. And I hadn't seen him in years, and he came because he knew what happened to me, and he spent hours sitting there telling me, saying, "You got to go back to your school. You've got to move on and go back to your school." And believe me, I wanted to go back to my school, but I was too embarrassed to see him or anything. And that night, my mother and I were talking, and she said, Bobby, the more you give up and stay secluded and not move on with your life, then the more the man who shot you keeps winning. My mother gave me what it took. She was my can of spinach. She did it all for me. And I'll never, ever forget it. I thank her so much to this day.
There were 3 years of his recovery where he lived at home with us, and I took him to college. He went to Camden County College. He took a course in criminology. It was all a process. He came to terms with a lot of things during this time. We tried to go to several different places. You know, we looked always for jobs, and we tried to figure something out that would be better for him when he started feeling that he was ready to work.
He wanted to learn just about the things that the blind people need to do. How do they organize their money? You know, how do you know that it's a 100 or a 20 or a 10 or a 5 or a 1? How do you know that? They feel the same if you can't see them. How do you organize your wallet and your credit cards? And you know, how do you find your toothbrush in the morning? How do you get around town without falling in a hole or tripping down a curb and getting run over? So when he wanted to go to the School for the Blind, I think Bob, being a very practical guy, he wanted to learn those types of life skills, and he dove into it.
Since 1990 and that journey of being blind and trying to figure out life, I dabbled into many different things. I contacted many groups. I went to many meetings to try to find work for employment for myself. I went to meetings with the big casinos down in Atlantic City. They had a big thing in Philadelphia over jobs they had doing telemarketing over the phone. I went to, I pushed hard to get a job with Amtrak. I was trying that direction. I was trying to, I went to school for massage therapy. I graduated thinking I'll be a massage therapist. That didn't work. I tried so many different things to try to find a job. There was a company that was a machine company that had certain parts and everything. They were so open-minded and professional about dealing with somebody with a disability. But the fact of the matter is, I never got the phone call back. I tried everything. I tried martial arts, teaching like I'm going to make money doing that. Nothing. Money makes money, and I didn't have it. I had no direction. It took all of those things and trying different things out to find which one's going to fall into place for me.
There had been several job fairs, and we went to them. But there was going to be another one. It had to do with New Jersey Division of Vocational Rehab, and I decided to sign us up for it. So we went. And at the end of the conference, probably because there was someone blind there, I don't know the senator's name, but there was a senator, and he was talking to the teacher. Bob and I are walking out and feeling, you know, I think that nothing really pertained too much to him. We were walking out, and we heard this senator say to this person, and I think he may have said it loud on purpose, I don't know, but he said something like, the Business Enterprise Program for the Blind is really a good program. And Bob stopped, and I said, did you hear that? You know, and he said, yeah, you know, and I said, well, let's go back and find out about that.
A man had spoken about the Business Enterprise Program. And it clicked in like this. I remember when I had I had jury duty, and I remember going downstairs for lunch, and there was a gentleman down there who was blind running the snack bar downstairs at the Camden County Courthouse. And I remember that when I could see, years ago when I could see. I never would have thought that here I am having an interest in that program. The more I thought about it, it wasn't that that was my dream, but I looked at that program, let me check it out, I said to myself, because that program may give me the opportunity to make some money, which is a tool which will allow me to get back on my feet again. Come June, I'll never forget, it was a proud day. We were handed our certificates, and needless to say, I graduated the Business Enterprise Program via the New Jersey State Commission of the Blind. It was just a great, great feeling. I headed home, relieved in many ways, exhausted. And all of a sudden, weeks went by, and I began to realize I'm back to square one. I graduated this program, there's no openings, there's nothing available. There's nothing happening. There was nothing. It was so frustrating. But I didn't give up. I kept on and on and on saying, I want it, I want to make it work, I can make it happen, I am a people person, I've got the drive. When's there going to be a biggie coming up? When's there going to be a biggie? And I didn't give up. And then one day, phone rang. Gentleman said, Robert, I've got someone coming out to say hello to you, stop by your house. Such and such employee of State Commissioner Blind, and he just wants to chit-chat with you for a minute. Okay, fine. Guy comes by and we're chit-chatting. You know, what's your plans? We're going to do, what are you going to do? And he says to me, kind of in a humorous way, we got something for you, Robert. Ha, ha, ha. I says, wonderful. Where's it at? He says, it's in Washington State. Ha, ha, ha. It seemed like an hour went by, but it was just a few seconds. So much went through my mind. I turned and looked at him eye to eye. I was at a point in my life where if I didn't make a change, I was going to go nuts. I looked at him and I said, ha, ha, ha. Fly me out there and let me check it out.
One day I told them, you call Commission for the Blind and you tell them you graduated second in your class. And somewhere in this country, they have to have a safe place for you to work and where you could have a decent living. You know, it has to be something more than $7,000 or $8,000 a year. You know, it's good. There's places like that, Bob. You tell them to find you a place like that, and it can be. It doesn't have to be in New Jersey. You know, you've done enough. You've tried hard with New Jersey. You figure something. I was thinking, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia. You know, the Poconos. I mean, someplace along the East Coast that would be nice. And then they said Seattle.
When I came home, I sat down with my mother, my grandmother Nan, and Rick, little brother Ricky, and I said, I love you guys more than anything else. But I think I'm going to move to Washington State and give it a shot.
It was his decision then. If that's what he wanted to do, Bob was doing it, and no one could change him, change his mind. But I didn't think much about the decision when he made the decision, except for the fact that I was going to miss him. Could he have survived out there on his own? I felt yes, he could have. But I was also, in the back of my head, hoping he would come back.
I thought he was crazy, initially. But, you know, I mean, but then again, he wasn't supposed to be alive. So, you know, I mean, obviously he was given an opportunity to do something with his life, and it took guts. It really did take guts.
We felt, you know, a sense of loss. To some people, we were a tight group. Our family has been in this area, and everybody is still here. To another person, that may not mean anything. Their family may be scattered over different states. But to us, that's not a common occurrence. And he was the first one that actually went off and traveled that far.
I began to realize my family and my friends, they've got a life to live too. My family, I can do more for them of me being on my feet than I can of me sitting home waiting for that check to come every month. And my friends, we're still in touch today because the fact of the matter is they couldn't be with me every day. They have a life too. They did the best they could. But I had to take care of myself. And that's just what I did. I rolled the dice, made a tough decision, tried many things out, and I had nothing to lose. I remember kissing my grandmother Nan goodbye. I had so many tears in my eyes. And we went to the airport. My little brother Ricky I kissed. Mom's husband Rick. They took me to the airport. My mother, I hugged her so much. And took off. I took off to the great Northwest.
Living with a spouse who is blind.
I interviewed for a position at the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration on Sandpoint in Seattle, and I was selected, and I started in May of 1996. And the first day I started, I met Robert, and I had gone to lunch, and I was down at the cafeteria, and he was standing at the register, and I had no clue. I went through the line, and I selected my food and went up to the cash register and gave him some money and waited for him to give me the change, and he just kind of looked at me and said, excuse me, ma'am, but I'm visually impaired. Could you tell me what you just gave me? And I thought, gee, who is this man, who's, running this cash register? And I didn't know that he actually owned the business at the time. I just thought, well, gee, that's pretty remarkable that, he is visually impaired, he's blind, can't see, and is able to manage a cash register. So he asked me out, and what we had decided to do was go to the Pike Place Market in Seattle. I don't know why we picked Pike Place Market, because it's just an absolute maze and crowded with people and full of obstacles for someone who is visually impaired. So why we picked that, I have no idea. I went down to the cafeteria and we practiced in the cafeteria of him walking with me, and so that was pretty helpful. And then when we went to the Pike Place Market, I helped negotiate the curbs and the stairs and the corners, and actually that was a great place for me to overcome my fears of walking with him. To my recollection, I've only ran him into a pole once, but I have to say he's done worse for me, because I remember this one time he picked me up and threw me. He thought he was throwing me on the bed, and he missed, and my skull hit the windowsill, just about to the point of knocking me out. I had a pretty good knot on my head for a while from that one. Most people really try to do a really good job and protect Robert, but we're all human and things happen, and so we just try to just be careful as much as we can and recognize that that there can be accidents. My father handed Robert a saw once at a store, and so he gives the saw to Robert without explaining what he's giving him. And of course Robert will feel what it is to try to figure out what it is if somebody doesn't tell him. So he's feeling the saw, and of course he ended up cutting his fingers. So, but obviously my father didn't intend for that to happen. It's just that when you're around Robert, you can forget sometimes that he can't see what you're doing, or that you really need to make that extra effort to explain what you're doing or why you're doing what you're doing, so that he's getting that verbal confirmation. I always remind myself of the time we went to Cabo San Lucas, and this was several years into our relationship, and we went there on vacation with some friends, and we had eaten dinner, and we were walking down the road, and we became aware that we had forgotten about Robert, and he was behind us a half a block down, standing in the middle of the road, just waiting for us to turn around and realize he wasn't with us. It happens and this is really, I think, a compliment to Robert in a lot of ways, that we forget he's blind. Well, when we first moved in together, it was rocky. Robert, he had to learn a new neighborhood. He had to learn, where the store was. He had to develop new relationships with people who worked in our neighborhood. The taxi drivers, the store clerks, and the different businesses. And our house was up on a hill, and it was a 2-story. And it also had these stairs that went down from the front porch all the way down to the driveway, and the stairs curved. And it was a steep driveway. So, it was getting used to a big house, because he was in an apartment that was, I think, probably about 650 square feet, if I was to guess, into a house that was 2,400 square feet. And so it was a lot more space to figure out. And so for a while, it was a struggle for him to not run into walls or furniture. And I had to learn to live with somebody who was visually impaired, because I'd leave things around, I mean, I'll come back and pick it up later, and I couldn't do that anymore. But I still did sometimes. And then of course, I swear you could have a huge room with nothing in it but one thing, and he will find it. He will just go right to it. It has not bothered me as much that he can't and hasn't ever seen me as it bothers me that he'll never see his daughter. So, and you're right, it's an emotional question. But I think at first when we met each other, it was emotional. Because when you're not used to that kind of situation, it's somewhat unique. To be in a relationship with someone who's never seen you and probably never will. So it's just something that you make that decision that it's okay. We've had discussions over the years about these heavy topics, and I remind him and myself that if the injury had not happened, he would not have been out here. We would not have met. Savannah would not have been born. So you can't just look at the negative of a situation, because there's been wonderful things that have come out of it. I think when Savannah really figures out that he can't see her, that he's going to really learn what challenges really are, because she is very smart. And I think once she figures that out, we're going to have a whole new game that we're playing, because it's just all the rules are going to change. Sometimes I think that she is picking up that he cannot see. For example, if she has something in her hands that she wants him to see, she'll go up to him and put it in his hands. So I'm thinking that she's starting to understand that he can't see what she has. But on the other flip, she'll go hide in the house and say, "Daddy, come find me." And that's not so easy for him to do if she's hiding and not making any noise. So she's at that age where I think she's trying to figure it out. But she's worked extremely well with Robert in being able to interact with him. And it's been a great relationship to see happen. He was concerned when she was first born of how good of a father he could be, especially with an infant. I was nervous, so I could appreciate that he was nervous. I think that we balance things out. I play a more active role in some things, and then he plays an active role in other things. And it may just not be the same balance that most parents have, but we make those adjustments that we need to make, and it works. So, there's things that I do. I take her to school, I pick her up, I do her lunchbox, I dress her, but he picks up in a lot of different areas. On the weekends, I get to sleep in while he plays with her. He goes to bed with her. They'll watch some TV together. They'll just play in the living room, and and he'll go to the park with us sometimes and just be there for her. I don't know that I've ever left him alone with her. Not that I think something would happen, but there's a what if. What if something did happen? Luckily, we have family and friends nearby, and my father and stepmother and sisters have all played an active role with raising Savannah. Robert does not complain very often. And there's moments, we all have them. But I'm not sure complaining is the right word. He doesn't go around feeling sorry for himself. No pity parties, you know. So I think that he recognizes that there are many people who are worse off than he is in different ways. You know, it could be because, you know, somebody else has been the victim of a crime and has had a harder time of it than himself. It could be somebody who has everything but really doesn't have anything, you know, and he can separate that out. And he just doesn't lose sight that there are many people who have not been as fortunate as he has been. And he's commented that losing his sight has allowed him to see things differently and sometimes see them better than he thinks that he would have, you know, had he not lost his sight.
Robert moves to Seattle to own and operate the Modern Day Cafe.
Leaving Philadelphia with 2 gym bags and $500 and being blind to the other side of the country by yourself. I didn't think about it at the time, but it's not something many people could do or would think that they ever would or could in their life. But I guess when you hit a certain level, you hit the level I was at, it didn't stop me. I did it. I had nothing to lose.
If you know how he came out here, you know that he could do this anywhere. After his accident, you know, obviously he went through a lot of his own growing that he had to do, but he went through his business enterprise program. They found a place for him. Lo and behold, it's on the other side of the universe, over here in the Pacific Northwest, and you got to go to Seattle. He takes his 2 duffel bags and $500 and comes out to Seattle blind. He goes to the grocery store, he instantaneously introduces himself, and he gets someone to help him. And right away, they're friends with him. And that person will always help him when he comes into the store. Goes to the furniture store to buy furniture, and he just starts asking questions and becomes very comfortable with people whenever he's with them. So in terms of creating families, you could take him, put him in Texas right now, and within a week, he surrounded himself with people that are more than willing to help him.
I was one of the first individuals he met up here in the Seattle area, and I was running a martial arts school in Seattle. And he had been involved with seminars in my martial art back in New Jersey prior to his accident. And he called me on the phone one day, and he said that he just arrived out from New Jersey, he was new in town, and that he wanted to come meet with me in my school and possibly do some training. And so from there, he came and met me at the school, and I actually didn't really know that he was blind until he pulled up and he had the cane and the glasses on. And I was actually, to be honest with you, I had a little preconceived idea in my mind thinking, well, how am I going to do this? Because I had never trained with anybody that was blind. And to my surprise, he was just like anybody else. As a matter of fact, he put more effort towards training than anybody else I've ever known.
I would say that probably my first impression was that here's someone who's very confident and was very self-assured, you know, and I think one of the things you get when you first meet Robert is that New Jersey accent that's, you know, kind of in your face, gregarious, you know, got lots to say and animated, yeah. Would be your thing, in comparison to the typical Washingtonian that tends to be a little more reserved.
He didn't say, I'm going to change my name from Bob to Robert. We just noticed that relationships cultivated out there and his future wife, and it was always Robert. was Robert this, Robert that.
He went from Bob to Robert, And he just wanted to reinvent himself, and he wanted to get on with his life and make it a whole new life.
He once told me that he had to move away from New Jersey because he needed to be able to do it himself. And I think if he had stayed in New Jersey, the friends and the family would have been more helping him more, and he needed to grow up and do it all himself.
I got picked up at the airport, SeaTac Airport, which is south of Seattle. The Washington State Department of Service of the Blind gave me a ride up to South Seattle. And sure enough, I was given a bedroom in a building that was owned by the Lions Club. And basically, I was given a month to open this business up on the other side of Seattle. Finding an apartment, getting an accountant, getting an insurance company, payroll company, finding out how to get from point A to point B, all of these things, opening up a bank account, were all things on my plate that I had to do. In the midst of that, we had several meetings at the business that I took over. The business that I took over was called the NOAA Cafeteria. NOAA stands for the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. The name of this business was the NOAA Cafeteria. I knew right away the first change that I was going to do was give this name of this business some spirit. Change it. It needs a name. It needs a spirit. I decided to call the business the Modern Day Cafe. The second thing I decided to do was to go from a Kmart / Target to a Macy's / Nordstrom. I wanted to up it. We cleaned that place thoroughly 3 times. Professional cleaners came in. We changed the presentation of the menus, changed the whole guts of the menus. We had beautiful uniforms made for the employees. We got rid of your Folgers, Sanka coffee, whatever it was, and put in some top-of-the-line coffee, some good coffee. In fact, the name of the coffee we first worked with was called Seattle's Best Coffee, which is really big in the Northwest. We worked that product, several other good ones. We always kept to that level. We had our fantastic espresso machine, and we were moving some fabulous espresso drinks. We started making our food from scratch. None of this soup out of the cans, none of that stuff. Good product, good presentation. And then I came up with a motto for the business. And it goes like this: good food, good people, good times. The Modern Day Cafe.
He likes quality, and he was in an atmosphere where his customer wanted quality. So his menu was always a large menu. It had lots of quality features about it, and he knew how to do things with a flair. And he found people who could do those things with a flair for him.
He called me one time, and it was right after he moved to Seattle. So the phone rings, and I pick it up, and Bob's laughing on the other end of the phone. And he told me that he was at his then restaurant that was called the Modern Day Cafe. Bob always loved things to rhyme. Everything had to rhyme. And he told me that as his Halloween prank, he wore a set of those glasses that have the springs and the eyes. And he wore this to work, and his employees, I'm sure, what do you do when your boss who's blind is wearing these glasses and he's putting some humor into it? You know, but it was just him, again, making the statement, hey, here I am, you know, and I'm not going to let this thing stop me.
A beautiful girl came up to the counter to pay for her stuff and said, just this stuff here. I knew she was a visitor or a new person, but I had no idea that I was going to fall in love with her. Sure enough, I smiled at her and said, I'm sorry, I'm blind. I can't see what you got there. She was so embarrassed. Nevertheless, she tiptoed away. And after that, we ended up chit-chatting, getting together, and kicking off to a long relationship. Her name's Kimberly. After being at this restaurant for approximately a year, we had a lot of people who lived in the neighborhood, not just the federal government employees who worked for the Department of Commerce, but there was a lot of people who lived in the neighborhood who were retired. They loved to come down for a cup of coffee in the morning, have their 2 eggs, toasted bacon, you know. And it was just, you know, it was a whole group of people that come down. And there was this one couple that would come maybe once or twice a week. And they always would love asking me questions about myself, which I found kind of interesting. And the couple was Russ and Yvonne. And finally one day they pried out of me a little bit more about my experience with martial arts and the things I did, and they just loved it. And they went on and on and on, push on, I need to do a seminar. And finally one day I said, okay, we'll do a seminar. And I put my uniform back on, and I did a seminar teaching self-defense to a women's group. And we raised some money, and we donated all the money to the Little Anchor Daycare Center, which was there in Noah.
At the end of that seminar is when I first heard the story of what happened to him. And that's what really, it moved everybody in that room. And when he told that story about how he got shot in the head and what happened to him, every person in that room was in tears within moments, and so was I.
The women were so touched by the teaching, me sharing my story, everything, that I realized it was bigger than what I originally visualized it in my mind to be. And it was 2 days later, phone rings, Seattle Times newspaper comes and does a huge big article all about me, and they picture me out by the Lake Washington. The whole story. It was a great article. The phone wouldn't stop ringing after that. People just so thank you. It was a great story. We heard blah, blah, blah. On and on. On and on. Thank you so much for everything. Then the phone rings. It's Northwest Central News. We want to come and have you do a news story on Northwest Central News, which is a 24-hour news station in Northwest, covering Oregon, Washington State, and Idaho. And they showed up. Did a great thing, came on the news. I had the phone ringing again. A woman called me, she was on the wake saying, the story, I watched your story and read about it. I said, you've touched my life, and I just want to thank you so much. I'm going through some tough times in my life, but after reading about you and watching on TV, you've really helped me get the strength to turn this page and move forward. Thank you so much. Hung up on me crying. I'm thinking to myself, what have I done? What is this? And then it all began to get so clear. I realized that there's more to this situation than meets the eye. I am now back on my feet running this business, but I need to now remember that I am a unique individual who was a victim at one time, who turned the page, got on his feet, and moved on with life, and has the potential and the ability to share this energy to others.
Depending on the seminar, oftentimes they won't even know that Robert's blind. We went into, an example is we went to an alternative school up in Everett, Washington here. An alternative, which means it was kind of a bad kid's school. And we did a demonstration there. So we start off with a demonstration. He doesn't say anything. And these kids, right away, you can look at their face and they're like, who does this guy think he is? They're snickering. You can see them telling jokes in the audience. And we get started. We haven't said a thing. They don't know what they're about to see. They know that there's some martial arts demonstration going on. We go out there, we're breaking boards, and Robert's just going nuts. He's breaking boards, he smashes through a set of bricks, does all this stuff, and then he's done. And it's quiet. And everybody in the audience is just waiting for him to say something. And then he'll say something like, it's amazing that I can still do this, even though I'm blind. And all of a sudden you see the looks on these kids' faces looking at him. Because he's just wearing sunglasses, thinking, who's this cocky guy wearing sunglasses? And he just thinks he's Mr. Macho. And then he stands up there and he starts to tell his story. And these kids were moved.
There are a lot of reasons why I like to have Bob come to my school to visit. It's an honor and a privilege to have him there. First and foremost, he's a terrific martial artist. And he's a part of my history. And I love for my students to be able to share on that history. But the power of having Bob come in is this. So many people today, they focus on negative. We have a society where people are more concerned with what they can't do than with what they can do. And it's hard to complain about the little things that are happening in your life. that you'd like to believe are holding you back. And because you believe they are, they do. You know, then you meet a guy like Bob, who's been through it all, and you see where he is, happy and successful. It's hard for you to feel sorry for yourself. So Bob has that powerful effect on our students, and we know that the students all have this power within, but if they don't know it, they can't use it. And a lot of times, just after an hour with Bob, it's a life-changing event for them. So if I can provide that opportunity for my students, I'll do it as often as I can.
If you have somebody like that who has the courage to make that big a difference in their life, they have the courage to operate a business and be able to be successful in many ways in that business. Once they have the skills of knowing how to run a restaurant or a cafeteria.
In 2002, I decided it was time for a new adventure in my life. I had heard about, through the grapevine, a licensed blind vendor group joining forces with a consultant company and running full food service contracts for Fort Lewis, for military sites, not just Fort Lewis, but Fort Lewis was coming up for bid soon. Basically, I was ready for a change in my business. I was somebody with leadership and confidence that could run an operation with this professionally and do it well. And I went after it. Wasn't overnight. Took 2 years in court. They weren't ready for a licensed blind vendor. But in 2004, September 2004, September 1st, I walked into my office and I became the president and CEO of Certain Victory Food Services Incorporated.
He had been in his facility a long time, and like anything that you do, it's sort of like you had this job, you've been in this job, and you've outgrown it, or you feel like, I have to do something different.
I thought it was a big step for him. You know, I mean, there's always the possibility when you're dealing with with the government and these kind of contracts that they can go ass up and so forth. There's a lot of bureaucratic red tape, and this would be the first actual time that they would actually be, in this particular case, allowing someone who is visually impaired to bid on this particular contract, from what I understood.
When an opportunity comes up, we open it up to everyone and says, if you're interested in this opportunity, submit your application of interest, or notice of intent, we call it. And so Robert and others submitted their notice of interest in this opportunity, and we convene a board where we have a selection board and try to pick the person who best is prepared. And Robert did the best in the selection process.
Our employees have ranged anywhere from 400 to 800 employees, depending on the time of the year. And our little motto is, we are here to feed the soldiers. Period. Cut and dry. We are here to feed the soldiers. And I got to tell you, it has been such a great feeling to be there and take care of our troops who protect our country.
You got a pay raise? No. You didn't tell me that. There was a house that they gave me McDonald's food. I just told you, I can't believe that. You got a pay raise. And he still gets me a map for Christmas.
He's donated a lot of money. As a matter of fact, he was just telling me about something today where he donated, it was for, I think it was for someone that was trying to raise money for HIV, and it's a young kid, and he was like $900 short of his goal, and Robert wrote a check to it, to help out other people. And he's just huge on that. I mean, I don't think that I know anybody that is more caring for other people than Robert.
He walks up and gives his mother a hug and gives me a hug, and he says, Rob, bring that little package over here that's from Savannah. Little package from Savannah. A little package, an envelope, all the papers to this car that's sitting out in front of us. And he says, Mom, how do you like your car?
We just had a baby recently, and my wife had some complications, so he calls her. He won't even call me, and she'll have an hour-long conversation with him, like, he didn't even want to talk to me? It's like, no, he's fine. You call him later. So he's very caring about other people, too, in your life and your family, and that's been great.
I'm totally, like I always been with him, I'm totally like proud as could be, you know, proud as could be. I mean, when he was little, I've always just been totally proud of him, you know, and I just telling him last night, I said, Jesus Christ, Bob, I shouldn't have never went to Seattle or come out there and stay with you. He said, why? Because I ain't thought about living nowhere else but there since.
I'm so glad to see that he's so successful. I'm so glad to see that he's happy. He's married, he's got a child, he's got a beautiful house. You couldn't ask for anything more for your friend.
I do believe in destiny to a certain point. I do think that we can make decisions every day that have a result on the outcome of today. I don't know that Bob's destiny was to be blind, but I do think that Bob's destiny was to be great. And he's been able to parlay this disability, which is a bad word today, but his blindness, into greatness. So while the day-to-day events led to him becoming blind, that big thing of him being blind has pushed him forward to becoming great.
He didn't let this get him down. He could have. He could be an invalid in a home somewhere in New Jersey, not working, living on unemployment, or whatever it is that they could have given him, and he could have crawled away in a hole and been nothing. And that's not Robert. He's the exact opposite of that. He's what I consider to be the definition of a warrior, which is you take responsibility for what's happened to you in your life and you make the absolute most of it.
I think only great things will happen from here on. I mean, the things he's doing with the public and reaching out to people that have disabilities, I think that's one. I think putting a good face, you know, not that there's a bad face, I don't know how to say that, but shining the light on visual impairment and getting people aware that it's, you know, yes, it's a handicap, but you can overcome any handicap, whether it be ailments or mental, you know, you can overcome those things if you really, really work hard at them. I think that's a good thing. I think he's inspired so many people who aren't doing well in their life, and you know, I think he's going to do great things. I think people want to strive to be better after speaking with a guy like Robert Ott.
This has been an incredible journey for all of us and his family. And as we sat over on Broad Street the other night, and he was up in a toast here and a toast, and from those years ago, you never would in your wildest dreams imagine that here are a new group of people and a new group of friends, and all these relationships would come together. You could never, ever see that happening from where he started. Just that simple.
Here's to turning the page, moving on, and a loving family, and I thank you, everybody. Toast. Hey, hey. There you go.
And we thank you.
Oh, I'm sure.
As of 2008, Robert and Kimberly Ott have 2 children, Savannah and Robert Jr. Robert continues to feed the soldiers at Fort Lewis with his company, Certain Victory Food Services Incorporated, and now a 6th degree black belt. Robert has presented over 200 lectures and seminars around the country. Robert and his family currently reside in Olympia, Washington. Visit www.certainvictory.com for event listings, contact info, and to order Robert's biography.
Oh, yeah.
Probably not, but that's okay. This is.
Watch it dancing around. That's how it feels so good.
Daddy. You're funny, Daddy.
That's our oldest man.
Funny Daddy.
It's gonna get silly.
Yeah.
Say silly, Daddy.
Look at my big stick. Dad.
You can roll.
following is a presentation of the poem Flowering Warrior by Robert J. Ott. When the wind and the cold air cuts through the skin, while the endless surrounding of blackness encompasses our existence, in life we must then learn to see the true light. For in life no one can take away our lust, passions, drives, and dreams, nor can they take away the strength, courage, and indomitable spirit that we all carry inside. Ultimately, the love of life and others will persevere through all of the challenging journeys that are faced. In all, we hold that of a flowering warrior who will never surrender.